to remember that Our Lady obviously had a Holy Mother. And so obviously Our Lady was born to Joachim and Anne. And Anne was late in her life when she had a baby, Our Lady. And it is said that Our Lady was taken to the temple at a very, very young age, and the temple became her home. So obviously that's where she came to live, to learn, and she lived almost like a modern day monk, so to speak. That she lived in the temple, and so when we come to the presentation, and Our Lady brings our Lord into the temple, in a sense it would have been like a coming home for her. That she entered into the temple to present our Lord into the temple, and it was like a coming home. That she was coming home, literally coming to her home, so to speak. That the people in the temple would have known her. So the prophet Simeon would have known her. They would have all known her, which would have been, as I said, like a coming home. And obviously, as we know, that the mother of Our Lady, that she was a holy woman, she was a devout woman, and she gave herself over to the work of being a mother, and that she had that great fondness towards God, and that she saw the temple as once again as being her home. That she was a holy woman, a devout woman, and like of the great prophets and prophetesses of the Old Testament. So if we think of Hannah, obviously she had Samuel in her later years, and that she was a holy woman as well. She was a devout woman. She lived a moral life, a virtuous life. And we notice with Hannah that they also dedicated Samuel to the temple, to God. And we see this obviously with St. Anne, that she dedicated Our Lady to God. We also see with Saint John the Baptist, Zachariah and Elizabeth. Once again, Elizabeth had St. John later in life. She dedicated him to God, and he became one of the great prophets of the New Testament, of that in between. That he was like the precursor. He was pointing towards the coming of the Messiah. And so obviously that God had called Elizabeth, had called Anne, had called people like Hannah to do great things for God, and to dedicate her children to God, their children to God. And obviously this is something that we should be thinking in our own lives as well, that we dedicate our children and also our spiritual children as well. That so often that we're going to have children which are going to be given to us, so to speak, that we dedicate them to God as well, through our prayer life, through the way that we view the church, that we want them to know and love and serve God. So we dedicate our children to the church. We dedicate our children to the temple, to the chapel, so that they would come to know and love and serve God. And that we would want to, and that we'd have obviously we'd have a love towards God. But one of the other things, which is something that we really need to build deep in our lives as well, is that we have a love towards motherhood. And this is something which has really sort of gone out of vogue, so to speak, in the last 100 years, so to speak. That this movement away from the love of being a mother. It is something that has been lost. And also marriage as well, being a wife, so to speak, of marrying and having a family. This has sort of gone out of vogue. And obviously it is the heart of our life as a Catholic, as traditional Catholics, that we would want to marry, that we would want to have a family, and that to have a love towards motherhood and to have a devotion towards it and to honour it and see it as being something that is really, really important. If you have a good mother and you have a good father, we're halfway there in life, so to speak. And we want to be a good husband, and that we want to be a good mother, that we want to raise our children, know, love and serve God. And so often in our modern world today that we almost outsource. In a sense, we almost outsource our whole lives, but we sort of outsource motherhood. Before before school care, after school care. That so often our children will have more to do with pagans, with non-believers, than with believers, than with their mother and with their father. They'll be spending more time with people who do not love God. And so it's very important that we don't outsource our children. We don't outsource motherhood. We don't outsource fatherhood. And I was noticing one day when I was driving down the road, you know how they have those little TVs on the in the cars. They have those little TVs now, and you had you had all these people in a car, and there was little TVs going on the back of the seats. And I thought to myself, that's almost another form of outsourcing. Where's the conversation between mum, dad, and the kids? I had another lady. She said she'd just play movies all day, for her little children. Where's the conversation between mum, dad, and the kids? We're sort of losing that sense of being a mother or being a father or being a family, that we're putting it onto other people. And sometimes the content that we're giving to our children is going to be leading their souls to hell. It's not good for us either, but it's not good for our children. And obviously maybe I'm just romanticising back to a previous time where we didn't have those things. You sat in the car with Dad and he talked about everything, but still, but he talked, and we talked. And so obviously it's so very, very important that we build up that family life. And one of the other things which I think is very, very important is that we have that integration between our family life and our church life. There needs to be sort of like an integration where we see those two working together. Obviously family life is going to be very, very important, but also church life as well. Where for some people, family life is over here and church is over here, and so often those two don't meet. But we need to see like an integration of the two, that they work together hand in hand. Obviously they're doing different things, but you have that integration between church life and family life, that there's not a brick wall between them. And one of the other things which I think is interesting, that when we think about St. Anne, so often we use the word the Immaculate Conception, that Our Lady was born immaculately, that she was born without the stain of original sin upon her soul, and that she became like the second Eve of the new covenant, so to speak, that she was born without the sin of original sin upon her soul. But obviously the mother who gave birth to Our Lady, the Immaculate Conception, was St. Anne. There was St. Anne. And so the womb in which Our Lady was conceived immaculately was in the womb of St. Anne, which is obviously a great treasure, so to speak. A great treasure for St. Anne, a great treasure for Our Lady as well, but a great treasure for the church as well. That Our Lady was born immaculately, and it was in the womb of St Anne. Which obviously reminds us as Catholics is that even though St Anne wasn't born immaculately herself, but God had given her a grace to live a holy and a godly way of life. And as I was mentioning before, that this can be the case for us as well. That we can be living a holy and a godly way of life as well. That sometimes we have in our mind that it is inconceivable for us to be holy, for godly. It is inconceivable for us not to commit sin, particularly mortal sin. And so we think that it is impossible for us not to be living the life that God would want us to live. But we can live the life that God would want us to live. That we can be doing what is holy, what is godly. And so obviously we have the example of holy women like St Anne. That she was living a holy way of life, a godly way of life. And that God, through His grace, preserved her to do that. But sometimes we'll have in our mind that it is impossible for me to do that. That's the little fella on your shoulder talking to you. That's the demon on your shoulder saying that you can't do this. But what we need to be listening to is our guardian angel on our other shoulder, saying that yes, we can do this, that we can live a holy and a godly way of life, we can live a virtuous way of life, we can live a moral way of life, we can be living the life that God would want us to be living. So it's very, very important for us to keep that in mind, particularly in the world in which we live, is doing everything that would try to take that away from us. But one of the other things which is important for us to remember, that obviously with St Anne, with Hannah, with Elizabeth, that they had their children later on in life. And obviously when they did have their child, that it was a great blessing from God. And that is the way we ought to be viewing motherhood and having children, as being a great blessing from God. Obviously, our children are going to have their moments, so to speak. I know I probably had my moments as a child, but we should not see that as being a great burden. That really having children, bringing children into the world, ought to be a great blessing. It ought to be a great grace as well. And particularly when we look around the world today, we can almost see like a lot of barrenness, so to speak. That people aren't marrying, that people aren't having children. They don't see motherhood in a good light. They don't see family life in a good light. And sometimes we just make the best of it we can, so to speak. We try to live a good life in the marriages that we have. But we can also see this in the modern church today. There's a great barrenness there. There's a great death of the faith. The death of the priesthood, the death of the church, so to speak, or the modern church, I should say. And obviously we know how our Lord, when He looked at that fig tree that wasn't bearing fruit, He cursed it, so to speak. Obviously, it was a sign of the Old Testament, the Jews, so to speak, that they were not going to accept the Messiah, so they were going to become barren. And obviously, in our modern world today, we see this barrenness almost right across the whole board. And I remember many years ago, I told this story about this lady who had, I think she had something like about 10 children, 11 children, or something like that. And she went into the doctor, and the doctor said to her, because she went in there with like 3 children, and she was pregnant with, I think, with the 11th or something like that. And the doctor said to her, she said, you know, you've got 3 children, you've got 1 on the way, so we really should sort of fix it so that you can't have any more children. And she said, well, what am I going to do with the other 6? You know, because at the time she had 11. Or they had 11 on the way, so to speak. But you know, that it was like that great generosity of soul. That she was very generous. She was very loving as well. Well, she's probably very harsh as well to the children, but she was also very loving. She was a great generosity of soul to have 11 children. You just got to be generous. Where obviously if we become obviously very selfish, we get very self-centered, we get ourselves caught up in ourselves, so to speak, that we don't want to be giving to God, we don't want to be giving children to God. We're gonna have like a barren heart, like a barren soul. And so obviously it's very, very important that we have this sense of a generosity. And obviously we see this with St. Anne, that she had that great generosity towards God, that she gave her daughter over to the temple. Obviously we see this with Elizabeth as well, and Hannah as well, that they had that great love of God. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.